Ibrahim Traore has just done something no one expected. He's replacing USAID's food aid with locally produced rice, supplying other African countries instead of relying on handouts from the West. This is a major shift, a wake-up call that Africa doesn't have to beg for survival. But why is this happening now? And what does it mean for Africa's future? Chapter 1. The end of dependence on USAID. For decades, many African countries have depended on USAID and other Western aid programs for food security. These programs, presented as humanitarian efforts, have long been a lifeline during crises. But beneath the surface, they have created a cycle of dependency that keeps African economies weak. Instead of developing self-sufficient agricultural sectors, governments often found it easier to accept food shipments from the West. But Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young leader, has taken a different approach. He is proving that Africa doesn't need handouts. It needs investment in its own production. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has massively increased its local rice production. In fact, the country's agricultural sector has expanded so much that it is now exporting rice to other African nations, directly replacing the need for USAID food supplies. This isn't just a political statement, it's a complete economic shift. Burkina Faso's rice production has surged from 280,000 metric tons in 2022 to 326,000 metric tons in 2024. Instead of waiting for foreign aid, Burkina Faso is now feeding itself and others. This move challenges the long-standing narrative that Africa cannot survive without Western assistance. Chapter 2. Why did Trump cut USAID funding? One of the biggest reasons for this shift is that the US has been changing its aid policies. During his time in office, Donald Trump suspended USAID programs, freezing funds meant for African health and food aid initiatives. Programs like the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief were affected, leaving countries like Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe scrambling to fill the gaps. Trump's decision shocked many, as it meant cutting off support for millions of people receiving antiretroviral treatment for HIV/AIDS. But beyond health programs, the freeze also disrupted food aid, which had been a staple of USAID's involvement in Africa. Without these funds, emergency responses to outbreaks such as Ebola and the Marburg virus were also put at risk. While some saw this as a harsh and reckless move, others took it as a wake-up call. Angela Apiagie, an assistant professor at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, argued that African nations needed to reduce their dependence on external donors. She pointed out that prioritizing domestic investment in agriculture and public finance management would ultimately make Africa stronger. This is exactly the direction that Traoré is now taking. Instead of seeing Trump's aid cuts as a crisis, Burkina Faso turned them into an opportunity. Chapter 3. Africa has been funding the West all along. The belief that Africa depends on Western aid is misleading. Yes, billions of dollars flow into Africa every year under the banner of humanitarian assistance. But far more money is extracted from the continent. A 2014 report revealed that Africa received about $33.7 billion in aid annually. But in the same year, the continent lost a staggering $91.99 billion through debt repayments, multinational corporate profits, and illicit financial flows. This means that far from receiving help, Africa was actually losing more than $85 billion every year, instead of the West helping Africa. It is Africa that has been funding the West. This is why many have argued that aid is just another tool of exploitation. It comes with strings attached, forcing African countries to allow Western corporations to extract resources, control markets, and dictate economic policies. For example, Ethiopia's former Marxist dictatorship under Mengistu Haile Mariam used donor funds meant for famine relief to forcibly resettle large segments of the population. In the Congo, donated food supplies were sold on the black market to fund an arms factory bought from Italy. Even in more peaceful nations like Mauritius, donated rice was diverted to tourist hotels instead of reaching the people who needed it most. Corruption has played a huge role in this, with large portions of aid funds ending up in the pockets of government officials and their allies. Transparency International and other watchdog organizations have exposed multiple cases of aid embezzlement, with stolen funds stashed in offshore accounts or used to buy luxury properties abroad. Chapter 4. How aid destroys local economies. Foreign aid doesn't just fail to solve Africa's problems, it actively makes them worse. One of the biggest consequences of aid dependency is the destruction of local industries. Take Kenya, for example. The UN's World Food Program frequently ships corn to Kenya under the pretext of providing food security. But instead of being distributed fairly, much of this corn ends up on the black market, where it is sold at extremely low prices. Local farmers simply cannot compete with these artificially cheap imports. The result? They go out of business. If Kenya continues to rely on these food shipments, it will never develop a self-sufficient agricultural sector, and if a real famine hits, the country will have no local reserves to fall back on. It's a vicious cycle. The same thing has happened in the textile industry. In 1997, Nigeria's textile industry employed 137,000 workers. By 2003, that number had plummeted to 57,000. Why? Because second-hand clothing from Europe flooded the market, making it impossible for local manufacturers to compete. Europeans, thinking they are donating to a good cause, send their old clothes to Africa. But instead of helping, these donations are sold at such low prices that African businesses can't survive. What was meant to be a humanitarian effort ended up crippling an entire industry. Chapter 5. Ibrahim Traoré's model for a self-sufficient Africa. Burkina Faso's agricultural success proves that Africa can thrive without aid. Instead of importing food from the West, Traoré has focused on investing in local production. This approach doesn't just ensure food security, it creates jobs, strengthens the economy, and keeps wealth within Africa. By exporting rice to neighboring countries, Burkina Faso is setting a new standard. Instead of waiting for handouts, African nations can trade with each other, build strong regional economies, and develop industries that serve their own people. If more countries follow Burkina Faso's lead, the entire continent could shift away from dependency. Instead of relying on Western donations, African nations could trade with each other, develop better infrastructure, and create self-sustaining economies. When President Traoré spoke of agricultural transformation, many may have assumed it was just another political promise, but actions speak louder than words. In 2024, his government made a decisive move, purchasing 400 tractors to boost food production. Burkina Faso would no longer sit back and wait for food imports when it has fertile lands, hardworking farmers, and the ability to feed itself. The results of this vision are already visible in Banzan, where a vast agricultural project is redefining what is possible. The Banzan Plains, covering 450 hectares, have dedicated 100 hectares specifically to wheat production, a groundbreaking initiative for Burkina Faso. This is more than just farming. It is a declaration of independence. For too long, Africa has depended on foreign wheat and rice, importing tons of grain while possessing all the natural resources to cultivate its own food. That era is ending. Chapter 6. The transformation of rural economies. This initiative is not only securing food for the nation, but is also revitalizing rural economies. Thousands of jobs have been created across multiple sectors, from farming and harvesting to transportation and food processing. The ripple effect is undeniable. More jobs mean increased income, stronger local markets, and a vibrant, self-sufficient economy. Farmers who once struggled to make ends meet are now at the center of a national transformation. The energy in the marketplaces is electrifying. Stalls that once sold imported rice and wheat are now filled with fresh, locally grown grains, a powerful symbol of self-reliance. Consumers are seeing the benefits firsthand, with affordable, high-quality food produced right on their own soil. This shift is more than economic. It is deeply symbolic of a nation standing tall and reclaiming its place as a food producer. rather than a dependent importer. What sets Captain Ibrahim Traoré apart is his ability to turn vision into reality. His leadership is defined by results, not rhetoric. His government has not only provided farmers with the necessary equipment, but has also invested in training, ensuring that they have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to maximize their yields. This is what true leadership looks like: empowering people, not just making promises. The governor of the Haute-Bassin region, Madame Mariama Konate, visited the project site on January 31st, 2025 and was visibly impressed. She saw with her own eyes wheat plants in perfect condition, a sign that the farmers are following expert advice and implementing modern agricultural techniques. It is a moment of pride for Burkina Faso, proving that when people are given the right tools and support, they can achieve remarkable things. Chapter 7: The Role of Industrialization in Burkina Faso's Future. But this revolution does not stop at farming. The success of the wheat production project is being reinforced by the commitment of Le Moulin du Sahel, a wheat flour production company that has pledged to purchase all wheat produced this season. This means that Burkina Faso is not only growing its own food, but is also building an integrated agricultural industrial economy. This is industrialization in action. No longer will the country simply produce raw materials and export them for processing elsewhere. Instead, value is being added within Burkina Faso, ensuring that the economic benefits remain within the country. This is how sustainable development is achieved, not through aid and dependency, but through bold, strategic investments that create lasting prosperity. Addressing the nation, President Ibrahim Traoré spoke with passion and conviction about the Banzon wheat and rice cultivation project. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you with great pride and joy as we witness a new era of agricultural transformation in Burkina Faso. Our nation is making history, and at the heart of this revolution is our unwavering commitment to food security, self-sufficiency, and economic prosperity for our people. We have the land, we have the workforce, and most importantly, we have the vision. No longer will Burkina Faso depend on foreign wheat and rice. We are reclaiming our right to feed our own people, to produce our own food, and to build an economy that works for us, not for foreign interests. This is just the beginning. We will continue to modernize our agriculture, improve our irrigation systems, and support our farmers. We will ensure that every child, every family, and every community has access to affordable, nutritious food. I thank the hardworking farmers, the agricultural experts, the industrial partners, and every citizen who believes in this vision. Together, we are proving that Burkina Faso is unstoppable. Together, we are showing Africa and the world that true independence starts with the ability to feed ourselves. The time for dependency is over. The time for action is now. Burkina Faso is rising, Africa is rising, and the world better take notice. Chapter 8: A Sustainable Future. Beyond the economic and social benefits, this initiative is also a victory for the environment. By increasing local wheat and rice production, Burkina Faso is dramatically reducing its carbon footprint. The environmental impact of importing staple foods from overseas is massive. Transportation emissions, fuel consumption, and supply chain inefficiencies all contribute to pollution. But with local production, these harmful effects are being minimized. This means fewer emissions from transport, less dependency on fossil fuels, and a more sustainable agricultural system for future generations. The government is committed to ensuring that modern irrigation techniques, soil preservation methods, and responsible land use are at the heart of this agricultural expansion. The truth is, Africa has never needed aid. It has needed fair trade, investment, and self-determination. Western aid has often been a tool for control, not development. But leaders like Ibrahim Traoré are proving that Africa can stand on its own. The key to true independence lies in producing and trading within Africa. With the right policies, Africa can become a global economic powerhouse, not just a continent that waits for handouts. The shift happening now is historic. The question is, will other African nations follow Burkina Faso's example? Will they take control of their own economies and stop relying on aid that benefits the donors more than the recipients? What do you think? Is Africa finally breaking free from the chains of foreign aid? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's spread the word about a stronger, independent Africa.